everyone, and welcome to this episode of Musically Cogitating, a podcast about the relevance and importance of living in contemporary music of all kinds and how that music impacts our everyday lives. I am your host, Ciyadh, and thank you again so much for joining me here today. I have a very special treat and a Musically Cogitating first, an interview with my now good friend, movement partner, and co-conspirator, Jess Griggs. And in this episode, we talk a lot about music and about music journalism and about what it means to be someone who's interested in that field. So I hope that you enjoy. Thank you, Jess, for joining me on Musically Cogitating today, which is my favorite podcast, if I might say so myself.
I think it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good podcast. It's a good title.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I wanted to have you on the show today. Well, for lots of reasons. First of all, because, you're cool. You're one of my friends. I want to talk to you about music and journalism. And also, Jess and I work together on another podcast. And Jess is going to be doing some of the book club episodes with me in the future. Hopefully those will come out soon-ish. I ordered my book yesterday, so we're making way towards that. But yeah, I wanted to talk really about music and journalism, music writing, what that looks like now, your experience with that, and so on and so forth. So if you could you give the listeners a 30-second, 1-minute intro to Jess Griggs?
Oh my gosh. You have to time me, Ciyadh.
And go.
Oh my gosh. So I'm Jess Griggs. I work with Ciyadh, like Ciyadh said. I would say Ciyadh is also a friend of mine. We do a lot of stuff together. I do a lot of things in and around the music world. I find myself more on the admin and scheming side nowadays. But I did start in the music world with trombone and audio technology, and then out of college moved into music media, and then moved into symphony operations, and then found my way down to Austin, Texas, to Austin Classical Guitar. So I've been around the block, and then have a lot of side projects, because I don't know any contemporary musician who doesn't have side projects at this moment in time. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version, I think.
Yeah, I think my life is one big side project, but yeah, it's so much fun. It makes life worth living, I think.
Yeah, you gotta have some variety,
Right. I mean, spreadsheets are fun, but doing a podcast is more fun.
As I have 50 spreadsheets open tab wise on my computer right now. Oh,
right. So you started in trombone, and why trombone? Because
why trombone? So everybody in my family on my dad's side played trombone. However, I did not know that when I chose trombone. I think I subconsciously absorbed the trombone in my youth and forgot about it. But I don't know. I feel like it's a mundane story, but the band director from the middle school came down to the 5th graders or whatever and was like, "You should join band. Here are the instruments." And then they played the trombone, and it was like an epiphany moment. I was like, I want to play that. I'm going to play that instrument. And I was so excited. It's probably one of the first times in my life, in my living memory, that I remember being aware and that excited about something. And so I get off the school bus, and my mom's at home, and I'm like, "Mom, I'm going to play trombone." And she's like, "You sure? You want to play, you don't want to play saxophone. You don't want to play drums, literally any instrument cooler than trombone." I was like, "No, I want to play trombone." And she's like, "Okay, cool. Well, I think your dad has one in the closet." And I was like, "What?" So my dad came home, and I was like, "Dad, I'm going to play trombone." And he was like, "Okay, cool. I'll start giving you lessons." And that's how that went down. It turns out my dad was a jazz trombonist in the 80s and had a crazy time, and then gave up that career to be a computer computer software engineer,
Okay. Yeah.
support the family. But yeah, that's where trombone came from.
And then you went on to like an arts high school, right?
Yeah. So for senior year, for those of you from probably the Carolinas and maybe Tennessee, Virginia area, I went to University of North Carolina School of the Arts, but their high school division, which is free for North Carolinians, which is a beautiful, cool. Beautiful. Yeah. I would not have been able to afford it because like if you were out of state, even as a high schooler, they're asking for that like kind of interlocking money, like a couple grand, if not like 20 grand a year. I have to look at the numbers now, but you're on like, it's like boarding, it's like room and board and then classes and that kind of thing. But, yeah, I went for my senior year, and really thought I was going to be a concert trombonist. I was like, I'm going to play in the Berlin Philharmonic. I don't know where I got that from. I was just like, that must be the pinnacle of playing trombone. I'm going to play Wagner in the Berlin Philharmonic. Needless to say, things have changed. Yeah. This is where I was at 16, 17.
And then you went to Columbus State?
Yeah, I went to Columbus State to Schwab School of Music, which weirdly enough, like I feel like so many people go through Schwab, especially in the guitar world now because Andrew Zone's teaching there. Yeah. I always forget how big of a deal he is, but yeah, like the guitar studio and trombone studio there is pretty good. But yeah, no, I got there and I was like disillusioned very quickly. I think I was playing, oh God, what was I playing in the practice room? Like probably my sophomore year. I think it was like Tuba Mirum or something like that, like Mozart's Tuba Mirum. And I was just like, wow, is this all my life's gonna be? Like, I was like, like gradually increasing the tempo and stuff, trying not to like die for a lesson. As you do in music school. And, I don't know, like in that moment, I was just like, I have to go do something different. So I started signing up for audio tech classes, which was a great decision. Diversify your skill set.
Yes.
Yeah.
The name of an entirely different podcast.
And that really is. Diversify your skill set. And I'm glad I did because like, to be honest, I don't think my career would have been as fruitful if I had only focused on classical trombone. So, yeah,
that's fair. And then, so where does music journalism, where does writing fit into that? Have you always been a writer? Do you have diaries from your olden days, from your youth, your angsty? Is there a Wattpad that we should go find?
Ooh, okay. How deep? The question is, Ciyadh, how deep do we want to go into me as a writer?
As deep as you want to go.
Ooh,
my podcast voice.
Okay. That is a good podcast voice. Like drop it down like half an octave, and you got the NPR aesthetic. Okay, so low key, I think in the background, if music hadn't worked out, I feel like I always kind of wanted to be a writer. I think we romanticize writing.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Same.
Like I'm gonna like be typing away in my office. I'm gonna have a cat. I'm gonna like, I don't know, be in some like trendy location or whatever and like wistfully look out my window. So I started writing bad short stories in middle school. Pretty angsty short stories, as you do. And I actually took a lot of writing classes in high school and participated in slam poetry competitions, which is a whole other thing, and did like poetry out loud and stuff.
We'll have to talk about that later.
We'll talk about that at a later time, which I've dug up some of those poems. Probably 95% are pretty bad, but every once in a while I'll find something where I'm like, wow, that I feel like that's not too bad. But yeah, and then in college that really started translating into my studies. Like I do genuinely enjoy writing. I enjoy editing as well, which is another conversation. But so I was part of the honors college, and you had to write a thesis, a pretty intensive thesis, actually, for the undergraduate honors college at my school. So I started writing about music and propaganda, and I think that's really when I started putting on paper like music paired with society, or like really started thinking very critically about the way music is embedded within our society and can be used for, political gains, political purposes. And I focus mainly on, in that particular paper, on the Weimar Republic and the Third Reich, just because there's a lot of scholarship, and, I was an undergrad, like I wasn't doing original scholarship, so to speak. But I think that really kicked off my, that kind of trajectory, so to speak, which translated into music journalism, I guess. Amateur. I feel like I should put it as an entire disclaimer on this podcast, though, like very amateur music journalism.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Why amateur? And if you could, before you answer that, talk us through journalism, music journalism. Like, what is that to you?
Ooh, that's a really good way to word that question. For me, music journalism is, just writing about music. I think right now it's writing about music and how it pertains to our society or to people. I don't know I think it's very gray like the distinction between academic music writing and music journalism. Right. And I've had a couple, conversations with like my best friend who is going to school for musicology about that distinction. And I'm sure there are, try not, musicologists go to school for a very long time to be able to write very academically, to do, to think critically and do original research. Whereas I think in music journalism, I'm trying to think how to say that. I don't know, this part probably needs to be cut out.
No, just say what you feel. Say what you feel.
Yeah. I think, music journalism isn't quite as restrictive. You don't have to go to school for an incredibly intensive amount of time to get into music journalism, which I think is really nice. It helps if you are a musician, but some of the best music journalists that I know, who's like, for example, like James Bennett up at WQXR, I think he went to Columbia Journalism School. I'd have to fact check that, but he actually went to school for journalism and found his passion in classical music writing. Whereas I know a lot of other people that work the other way. They went to school for music and then fell into music journalism.
Right.
So, and then there's, people in between. I think that's kind of what music journalism is to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then why did you preface that statement or phrase with amateur music journalism? Because on the Internet of Things, where we all are right now, I think for better or for worse, it can be difficult to make a distinction between the two, right? The lines are really blurred because, for instance, like I have a podcast about music, like, and granted, I am someone who is trained in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
So people may or may not hold me and my words with authority, but I could also be doing the same thing and have no training. So why amateur?
I think, I preface it with amateur, honestly, in kind of out of respect for the people who I do know, like James Bennett, who are making their living off of music journalism, who do it well, and I think in my mind do it ethically and do it right, who are pushing for, more voices within classical music and stuff. Whereas I don't want to say I dabble in it, but like it's definitely a side project for me. It's not my main focus. My output isn't anywhere near somebody who's doing it professionally. I may be pumping out on a good year, one article every few weeks, and more often than not, just because of how hectic my life is now, like it's going to be one article, one blog, one interview every few months. So that's really why I preface it with amateur. Like my headspace just isn't there.
Okay.
All the time. And I think you're completely, the points that you brought up, like are completely warranted and have a lot of merit. Like it's very blurry, and like, I don't think you have to be trained in music journalism to be a professional music journalist by any means. Just for me, it's like I said, it's kind of the amount of time I'm really spending thinking in that headspace.
Sure. That's a fair assessment. I think, in music and in art, there's always that conversation of what it means to be an amateur versus a professional, and like what it means to be an artist, period, like, capital A artist. Artiste with the pinky up in there. And so I think I'm always trying to have that conversation with people and to be able to like really think through, because I think it's so important, because everyone creates something at some point.
Yeah.
And I think that artist as a title, as a label, as an identity can be fluid, and we should allow for that fluidity. But, we don't always. And so that's a conversation that I'm always looking to have with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Which whole other different podcast too, I feel like. Yeah, it's complex.
So, I mean, you are an artist, right? You're a trombonist. Why did you decide to write about music, right? Like we have interests.
Yeah.
Many interests outside of music that I'm currently discovering. And so I want to know, why did you decide to write about the thing that you loved and not about something else?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I've always written about music paired with something else that I am very passionate about. I've always been trying to find the intersection of music, like I said, within society, like for that thesis where I'm like, let's talk about music and propaganda. Let's talk about, this like I love history. I love learning about history. So, music history, like writing about that. I would also say that the first published music series I did was Turning Up the Volume with I Care. And that was about, it's currently defunct. We have put that, that has been retired. But
was I the last person on that? Second to last?
Yeah, Ciyadh was the last person. You are the last person.
Pew, 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 pew. Okay.
Shout out. It's a great interview, by the way. Totally go read it. Go listen to Ciyadh's thoughts.
I'll link it in the show notes.
Link it. Yeah, and that was, that's really about the intersection of classical contemporary music and identity, classical music and, race, gender, et cetera, and those, the artist experiences within our world of music. So I don't know if I could ever write about like purely music, just because I feel like that's boring. But music is also, I feel like, the lens in which I look at most of life, because I am a creator, and what I am creating most of the time is within a musical context. So I think it just made sense to write about music and the intersection of other things.
Right. I'm trying to think here. Oh, yes. So, Turning Up the Volume, I Care If You Listen, WQXR, like, what was that like? What was it like to be a journalist, like a music journalist?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say that
And I'm totally romanticizing it here, but like, but let me.
Yeah, no, you can romanticize it. I also don't want to rain on that parade, but like I was definitely a recording engineer when I was at those places. So I interned at NPR and working at QXR, and I oftentimes had a you wear a lot of different hats, but my main hat was editing in a terrible DAW called multi-track editor, listening to hosts, lighting up music, trying to just get segments ready for air. That was mainly why I was there. And when I was at NPR, I was like a big enough, I don't know. I was like, I am interested in, I want to see where Tiny Desk is recorded, because like Tiny Desk is like the thing. Yeah. So I literally went to my supervisor and I was like, hey, I have some free time. And he's like, cool, that's great. Like, what else do you want to explore? Which is like a big thing at the NPR internships, is like, you may come on for one thing, but they really try and give you enough time to go explore other desks or other areas of the company or nonprofit, I guess. And he was like, I was like, I want to go see Tiny Desk. I want to go like work with him. I have this experience. And he was like, cool, go talk to Josh. So I literally just went down and bugged the audio engineer for Tiny Desk and was like, I'll run cables for you. I'll set up mics. And he's like, cool, I always need a hand with that. So I ended up down at the NPR music floor, really like talking to mainly Josh, obviously, but like talking to some of the other people, and had a few conversations with the NPR writer. And there's only one like full-time NPR writer. There's a couple other writers that dabble. I don't want to say dabble. Who do writing.
Right.
And I was just really shocked by how close-minded that particular person was about classical and classical contemporary music, and this very, very traditional conservative route. I would say, with the exception of 2 or 3 people at WQXR, that was also kind of the feeling I got, is I was just always continually, and I shouldn't have been continually shocked, especially having gone to music school, but like, I was just very continually frustrated with how traditional and conservative classical music journalism was, and contemporary music journalism was. Yes. So I feel like a lot of my time at those 2 organizations was spent in frustration. And I feel like a lot of my music journalism was in reaction to that frustration and being like, I'm not okay with the state of this. I'm going to go seek out another outlet, which is really where I Care If You Listen came from, and like pitching, turning up the volume. So yeah, not, like I said, not to rain on your parade, but it was just a lot of frustration in those two places.
No, I feel that. When I interned at this radio station, when I was in grad school, it's the same thing. Of like, you're like, why don't you play this? And they're like, Bach it is.
Yeah. Or like, oh, it's not in our catalog, blah, blah, blah. Like, it would take a lot of time to get that in our catalog. So we're just going to kind of keep playing. We're going to keep playing that Mozart.
Yeah.
We're going to keep playing that Beethoven. Yeah. I also feel like, I don't know, this is like going off on another tangent, so please stop me. I feel like a lot of places where people write about music, specifically contemporary classical music, the people stay there forever. Like, it is the same person for 20, 30, 40 years. And, there's some merit to that, but I'm also like, you just get wrapped up in your own bubble. And then the programming, I feel like, at these places, or like what's being written about in these places. I mean, like, if you look at like Deceptive Cadence on NPR, I feel like they've like turned it around a bit within the last couple of months. But Deceptive Cadence. They were writing about kind of the same feel, the same beat for forever, or it feels like forever. I'm probably over exaggerating. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not changing things up on a frequent enough basis for people to notice, then it's forever. Then it's the same things that have been happening.
Yeah, I think there's also an element, and this was really talked about when I was at QXR. You still have to worry about donors. Like they're largely, it's not a for-profit company in a lot of cases, public radio. And, there's this perception of like, if we change up programming, we're going to get complaints from our audience members, and complaints did come in, but it's also like, are those the most vocal Karens, so to speak? Like, oh my God, we programmed some Florence B. Price. It's not Mozart's Fifth Symphony. Like, and like,
yeah.
I think there was also that perception of like, we gotta make the donors happy, which is like, exactly, it's a lot of the same stuff that you would see within symphony orchestras, right?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of those systems.
Do you see a lot of this as systemic injustices or biases?
Oh yeah,
that are really layered in the structure of classical music? I know I'm laying the foundation for a question that I am answering myself, but what do you think that music journalism's place is in combating those structures, like those systemic injustices and biases? Because I think that, I've been seeing a lot of people write about that or topics, that are like adjacent or relevant.
Yeah.
But what do you think that continued work is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's important to address that oftentimes music journalists are individuals who have their own thoughts and opinions separate from the organizations in which they work from or work with. And I would say that a lot of music journalists, especially younger within some of these organizations, and not everybody younger. I mean, there's other people and other hosts, they really push the conversation forward from the inside. And then I think you have a lot of music writers who are, on New Music Box, who are on iCare, that are really bringing these conversations and questions of systemic injustice to the forefront. So it's like kind of working internally and externally for like big, what am I trying to say? Like big organizations, like working internally and externally of big media corporations or organizations. I also too, like, I think it really helps get certain things within the public's eye and the audience's mind, because, I really think about James Bennett's work up at WQXR, and, you have to think about the audience, right, for your article. So like when I'm writing for iCare, if you listen, I know that audience is a lot of musicians. So you're talking to them, you're talking about certain things in a different way. Whereas if you are a writer for WQXR or New Sounds, your audience is largely not musicians.
Right. That's
It's the donors. It's that kind of thing. So when James writes an article about a composer that somebody may have never heard of, and it's like a woman that's been erased from the canon, so to speak, we're starting to, he's starting to bring that person back into the public conscience, and that conversation into the public conscience, and introduce them to new topics or new people or new pieces of music that they wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. Which I think is like an incredibly important piece to this entire puzzle of like tearing down systemic injustice within classical contemporary music that I think oftentimes, I don't want to say goes untalked about. I think it's just like a tool that's underutilized a lot of the time.
Right.
I had something else, and my brain totally like brain fog. Oh yeah, I think like that's also bringing a new topic or a new person to the public conscious is like such a skill or such a privilege that a lot of music journalists have. That I feel like in a lot of like big media organizations that you see that are writing about classical music, like oftentimes don't do. They're like, let's write another article about Beethoven, and I'm like, what other news desk at NPR is relaying old information like that, you know? Like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
That's something that like really hit me the first time I was within a media company, seeing how classical music media within those large companies or large organizations work. Like, they're not relaying the newest thing a lot of the times. They're like, let's talk about old stuff. And I'm like, that's not the purpose of the news. Like, the news is to help you keep up with current events. Like, why are we not talking about current events and current happenings within the arts world? Like, why am I seeing another article analyzing a symphony that has been played multiple times, or a concert review about a symphony that has been played hundreds and hundreds of times? I'm like, where are the other stories, basically?
Right.
And that's a huge frustration I still have.
Can I ask though, what do you find the difference to be between news and any other medium or form or genre? Do you see what I'm saying? So, you know, NPR is a news organization, right? So it like totally makes sense that they should be talking about things that are current.
Yes.
So it's like, when do you and who talks about things that are not current? I mean, do we leave the not so current stuff to the musicologists and the ethnomusicologists of the world to theorize about in their offices in academia, or like, where does that fit in to the everyday kind of person, the regular audience?
That's a good question. I feel like it's not so much that music outlets can't talk about old information. I feel like the ratio is off. Okay. Or like there isn't a new spin to it, so to speak. Like, there isn't a new angle that we're approaching it a lot of times. Or if it is, it's like, I'm stretching, you know, I feel like we're stretching a little bit. And it's kind of like, sorry, I'm like looking at NPR right now, you know, and I feel like, you know, arts and life, you know, I'm looking at their books, television, food, movies, pop culture, you know, art and design. They're always talking about the people within the scene now, or they're talking about new books or new galleries or new exhibits happening. And what's that? Let me try and find Deceptive Cadence real quick. They may have to maybe not be on let's see here, 1 second.
Deceptive Cadence, like what a pun to like really put out there.
What a pun. I'm just angry that they got to it first.
Right.
Yeah, like I said, they've really kind of like, I feel like, rebooted the last couple months. But, you know, I'm looking at May 11th, you know, we have a review of like CPE Bach, Mercurial Diversions for Uncertain Times. You know, a lot of composers are dying, so we have, you know, their biographies on there, which is totally fine. Once again, they are doing better. I feel like they are presenting a lot more new music, but like, you know, in the shadow of planets lies Gustav Holst's Sweet Little Sweet, you know?
Yeah.
Just a lot of that. And I feel like even 2 years ago, it was even more like the music immortality of Beethoven's Mighty Ninth. Like, I'm just like, okay, that's fine. But like, I don't know, present like one of the musicologists that is doing the scholarship. Like, tell me about their story. Tell me about like what they're doing. Tell me about the people behind the scenes. Tell me what makes this more interesting. Because I feel like, Beethoven, it's all news. Like 250 years or whatever?
Yeah, 250 this year, right? Or last year, or whatever. I mean, people are going to be celebrating it for the next 5 years. So
yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But I just feel like the ratio's off. And like I said, I do feel like within the last couple months, a lot of people have rebooted and rethought about the way they're presenting information, which is great. That's like definitely a positive trend that I 100% wanted to see. But I don't know. It came very late, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wonder, after the 2020 election, is that going to continue? Or are we going to return back to normal? And I don't know. We'll have to see.
The future will let us know. So if someone is thinking about, writing, journalism, music, where do they start? They want to do the thing that you're talking about, right? They want to balance it. They want to have a ratio that is a little bit more on the current side, a little bit less on the old and played 1,000 times side. Yeah.
Are you talking about somebody like trying to break into music journalism, or like an existing organization?
I think both.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, I'm listening to this show and I want to write about something. And I have some time. I am in school or I'm retired, like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a good place to start, if you're trying to break in, so to speak, or like get started, is pay attention to who's around you locally. We haven't really gotten into this, and I think this is a project Ciyadh and I are also both working on, is classical music oftentimes gets stuck, or the conversation oftentimes gets stuck into the three big cities, New York, Chicago, and LA. Mainly New York, I would say, LA after, and then Chicago. And that's a huge hindrance, because music's happening everywhere. Music oftentimes surrounds, small universities and strange places, or music venues in places that you don't think of. And so, say, for example, say I was back in Columbus, Georgia, doing my undergrad, and I really wanted to start getting into music journalism, not academic writing. There's like a really interesting kind of art scene on you can attest to, you're going to school in Athens, Georgia. There is an art scene in Georgia. You just don't think about Georgia as a place in which arts is happening.
Right.
But, LaGrange has a symphony. There's a pretty cool scene in Atlanta and Savannah. And I would just try and start getting into those spheres, or those groups. And one, you should know who's in your area anyway. Like, go make a friend. Go talk to some people who aren't in your immediate bubble, who aren't at your university, who aren't in your quartet. Like, go make some friends. Go to their performances after COVID. Be safe, or like go attend their live broadcasts. Yeah, at this point. Support them in that way, and think about how you, as somebody who wants to write about something, can amplify your scene's unique voice, or what's happening in your scene, or portray what's happening in your scene, because it's different for every place. And I don't know, you can write a concert preview. You could think about, a big thing that is affecting my area right now is a bunch of venues are shutting down that really support contemporary classical music. Like, let's do a deep dive into that and how that may affect the scene, or how that's already affecting the scene. And really start structuring those ideas. And I would just say start writing, start doing interviews if that's interesting to you. And then if you want, you can go pitch it to a smaller, I would say start with a smaller music journal.
Right, like something that's local or like I Care.
Local.
Yeah.
Or local. Like I think about Austin, like Austin, Texas, where we both are. We have like Sightlines, we have KUT, we have KMFA. See what your local arts and culture magazines are or online magazines are and pitch it to them or pitch it to a smaller online music journal. And kind of honestly see where it goes. Or you can go intern at a music radio station like I did. I would say that's probably a good place to start. Like focus on your local stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like by focusing on your local stuff, you already get the ratio correct because you're like, oh, I'm focusing on things that are happening now, that are happening currently. And then, who knows, maybe that does spark some sort of scholarship or article about Elfrida Andre or whatever, like a composer in the past, but it ends up being relevant to a current event as opposed to I'm just going to do a one-off article about a dead composer, so to speak,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think just to kind of reiterate, you can be doing this work at any stage of life. It's not
100%.
It's not limited to someone who is 20 or 19 and who's just figuring out like what they think they want to do with their life for that period. It's really like, oh, I have some extra time and I've always wanted to write. And so now I'm going to write, see what comes of this thing. And I'm going to send it to a few people and, I'm going to be open to their feedback and what they have to say. And then we're just going to kind of go from there. So.
Yeah. And going on your last point, like just like you can be at any place. I would love to see more non-musicians write about contemporary classical music, contemporary music, because I feel like sometimes they have the best observations because, we get, if you went to music school, I'm not going to say that we all think the same because we don't, but a lot of us have been trained to kind of like observe music and observe concerts in a very similar manner.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it gets boring for me.
No, I totally
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to hear non-musicians or like other type of creatives. Like, are you a visual artist? Like going to contemporary music? Like, tell me what you think. Like, what are you observing? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
observation is key.
Yes, 100%.
Well, before we kind of wrap up things today, I wanted to ask you, what have you been listening to lately? Because this is a show about music, and we've talked about music a lot, but we didn't talk about anything that we've listened to recently. So what have you listened to recently?
Oh, man. Can I curse on this podcast?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I have a playlist that I play. I've created like back in the day called Calm the F Down. Is that okay? Can I say that?
That's okay. Okay. And you can send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes.
Cool. I'll like block it out. I made it back in like 2016, and I feel like just due to the time that we're in right now, I've had to like go back to some of my comfort music, and I've just been repping on this playlist, and it's mainly Anderson .Paak's album Yes Lord, Venice, Alabama Shakes.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't know, some like Thundercat.
Okay, yeah, I see what
that kind of like, but like they're chiller tracks, I'm just like, like wrap me up in this good track. Make me feel safe. Make me feel safe.
make me feel the way that no, I'm not gonna make that statement, but I was gonna say like make me feel the way that my feet do when I put on a warm sock.
Like a weighted blanket.
Yeah, I have one of those.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's actually good. It gets a little hot sometimes, but I generally really like it. I would highly recommend a weighted blanket to anyone.
Nice. I have a very heavy blanket, but not a weighted blanket. I need to get one.
Yeah, although I don't like, some people just like use it like when it's like, they're taking their noontime TV time, and I only ever use it like when I'm going to sleep. I've never like been like awake and used it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like I would just fall asleep really, really fast.
Right. So
yeah.
But they're cool.
Yeah. No, but that's what I need in my music right now is a weighted blanket. I need to feel like I'm being, I haven't really been listening to too much classical or contemporary classical right now. I'm a bad musician.
I mean, I don't think I have either, except for the things that I've played. Listen to those.
Yeah, that's different. What are you listening to right now?
What am I listening to right now? Let's see. The last thing that I really listened to that I was obsessed with is Emmanuel Wilkins. He's this like a jazz saxophonist, and he has a band, and they just put out an album like a couple weeks ago. And so that's been my like, I'm going to listen to music now. That's the vibes I've been going for, which is probably like always the vibes I'm going for. I don't listen to classical music that much. And we can talk about whether or not that's good for me as a musician at a different time, but
different discussion.
Yeah, but I really enjoy that music, so that's what I listen to.
Cool. I'll have to go check them out.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jess, for chatting with me today about music and journalism. And yeah, we'll see you on the show. We'll see you. We'll hear you on the show soon for our first joint book club. And a lot of the things that Jess mentioned today will be linked in the show notes. And yeah, reach out to Jess. I'm telling you to reach out to her. But yeah, if she feels that that's okay, you can reach out to her.
Yeah, if you can find me on Twitter most of the time.
Yeah, that's how I first met. I'm using air quotes here. Met Jess was like I followed her on Twitter, and I don't know how. This was like years ago. But somehow this like happened, and
I feel like when I almost got canned from QXR, which is another story. I feel like I gained like way too much popularity, way too fast on Twitter. So a lot of people have seen me just rage tweet. I have evolved since then, but if you want to go on there, you can find me at Action Plans Jess. So
yeah. Cool. Well, again, thank you. And we will be with you all next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview with myself and Jess. I just laugh thinking about how much fun that was. Don't forget to give the podcast a follow on social media and to visit the website musicallycogitating.com. We also have a newsletter, which you can subscribe to, where you will receive some additional updates and bonus content from the show. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, please give us a like, rating, and review, as it helps for me to make the show better. That's all for today. I will see you, or I guess you will hear me, in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.